My son told me to leave my own house for 30 days because his wife's family didn't like me there. But when they came back from shopping that night, the old man they expected to find broken was sitting in my kitchen with something they never saw coming. My son told me to leave my own house for 30 days because his wife's family didn't like me there. But when they came back from shopping that night, the old man they expected to find broken was sitting in my kitchen with something they never saw coming. Let me tell you about the house first, because the house is not background in this story. The house is the story. I bought it in 1999 for $236,000, which at the time felt like a number large enough to have weather inside it. 3 bedrooms, original craftsman trim, a narrow front porch with 2 steps that needed replacing, an east-facing kitchen that caught the morning light before any other room did, and a detached garage in the back that I turned into my workshop. Not all at once. Nothing good gets built all at once. I ran electrical on weekends with help from a man from church who accepted payment in cash and pie because Grace insisted both were necessary. I insulated the walls myself. I built the first workbench from salvaged maple and leveled it 3 times because close was not good enough for a surface where honest work was supposed to happen. Grace used to sit on the back porch with coffee on Sunday mornings while I worked with the doors open. She would listen to the radio, say almost nothing, and somehow make the whole yard feel occupied. After she died, I kept the porch chairs exactly where they had been. People call that sentimental. I call it knowing where things belong. That house was where Caleb learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where I measured his height on the pantry door frame until he asked me to stop because he was 16 and thought being loved visibly was embarrassing, where I made every mortgage payment even when the month had too many bills and not enough mercy. I paid that house down for 24 years. Cabinets, built-ins, stair rail repairs, refinished dining tables, custom bookcases for people who wanted their homes to look older and steadier than they were. Every dollar went somewhere with purpose. Roof, taxes, insurance, principal, the workshop. That house was not given to me. It was not family property. It was not a resource waiting for someone younger to need it more. It was mine. Not because I loved it. Because I earned it. My name is Thomas Bennett. Most people call me Tom. I am 66 years old, and I have been a cabinet maker, furniture restorer, and finish carpenter for 41 years. That sounds like a job when you say it quickly. It was never only a job to me. What teaches a man things if he is quiet enough to let it? It teaches patience because force ruins what pressure can shape. It teaches humility because the grain does not care how badly you want the cut to go a certain way. It teaches memory because a table keeps every mistake under the finish, even the ones nobody else can see. My grandfather, Walter Bennett, taught me that. He had hands like old leather and a way of looking at boards that made them seem less like material and more like conversation. When I was 12, he let me hold his block plane for the first time. Not use it. Hold it. Tools are not toys, he said. A tool is an agreement between your hand and the work. I remember that because Walter Bennett did not waste sentences. He taught me on a Delta table saw older than my father's truck and a set of chisels he sharpened every Friday whether they needed it or not. In his shop, nothing was casual. Clamps went back where they belonged. Sawdust was swept before you left. A pencil line mattered because a careless mark could turn into a crooked cabinet 10 steps later. The thing he said most often was simple. A joint is a promise. He meant it literally first. If you cut it right, if the angle is true, if the pressure is even and the glue is clean, that joint will hold longer than the person who made it. If you rush it, if you cheat the measurement, if you pretend close enough is the same as right, it will fail. Not always immediately. That is the cruel part. Bad work can look fine for a while. It can sit in a dining room under good light and pass for craftsmanship until weight is placed on it. Then it opens. That sentence became more than shop advice for me. It became the way I understood work, marriage, fatherhood, friendship, ownership, the quiet promises people make not because anyone is watching, but because something important is supposed to hold when tested. I built cabinets for families who wanted their kitchens to feel permanent. I restored rocking chairs with arms polished smooth by dead grandfathers. I repaired dining tables where 3 generations had eaten, argued, prayed, and signed birthday cards. I learned that objects carry loyalty when people do not. That is why what they did to my workshop mattered. They thought they were moving tools. They were touching promises. Grace died in May of 1999. Sudden aneurysm. That is what the doctor said in the small room with the beige walls and the box of tissues placed exactly where bad news expects your hand to go. Caleb was 9. Old enough to understand that something permanent had happened. Young enough to keep looking toward the hallway like his mother might still come through it, if everyone waited long enough. I remember driving home from the hospital with both hands on the wheel and nothing in the passenger seat but Grace's purse. A brown leather purse. Scuffed at the bottom. A grocery receipt still tucked into the side pocket. That was the thing that nearly undid me. Not the word dead. Not the forms. The receipt. Bananas, milk, coffee filters, chicken thighs, dish soap. The ordinary evidence of a woman who had expected to come home. I bought the house 4 months later. People told me to wait. They said grief was not the right time to make large decisions. Maybe they were right in ordinary circumstances. But I had a 9-year-old son sleeping with the hallway light on, and I understood one thing clearly. If the world had taken his mother, it was not also taking a roof. So I worked. Cabinet jobs during the day, restoration work at night, built-ins on weekends, emergency repairs for people who wanted them done fast, and paid extra when I said yes. I came home with sawdust in my hair and glue under my nails and hands split open from winter air and solvent. I bought Caleb cleats when his old ones tore. I paid for the Washington school trip because Grace had circled it on the calendar before she died. I sat through parent conferences in work pants with finish stain on my cuffs. At 17, I helped him buy his first truck, a used Ford Ranger with a dented tailgate and an engine that sounded honest enough. I did not tell him what any of it cost me. Not the missed sleep. Not the jobs I took when my back was already warning me. Not the nights I sat at the kitchen table after he went to bed, moving numbers around on paper until the mortgage could be paid and groceries still existed. Children should not be raised under the weight of their parents' sacrifices. They should be raised beneath the shelter of them. That was what I believed. That was what I thought I had given Caleb. Shelter. Madison Cho Bennett was 32 when Caleb brought her to the house for the first time. I will be fair to her. Fairness matters, especially when the truth becomes ugly later. She made a good first impression, pretty in a controlled way, polite without seeming nervous. The kind of woman who noticed details fast enough to make you believe the noticing was generosity. She complimented the house before she had taken off her coat. "This place has so much character," she said, touching the old trim near the dining room doorway. Then she asked about the workshop. That surprised me. Most people saw a detached garage with tools in it. Madison asked what kind of wood I used, how long restoration took, whether I had ever taught anyone. She said she had always wanted to learn how to bring old furniture back to life. I liked that sentence. I wanted to like her. So one Saturday afternoon, I let her try. Nothing serious. A small walnut offcut, a sanding block, a square, and an old drawer front with a loose corner joint. I showed her how to follow the grain, how not to press too hard, how patience mattered more than force. She listened well for the first 5 minutes. Then her attention began to fray. She checked her phone twice, rushed the sanding until the edge rounded where it should have stayed sharp, tried to force the joint closed before the old glue had been cleaned out properly. "Craftsmanship is harder than it looks," she said, laughing. "It usually is," I said. She smiled at the tools, at the workbench, at the light coming through the open doors. But she did not look at the work. That was when the first small thought entered my mind. Madison did not want to learn restoration. She wanted the image of being the kind of woman who would. I filed that away. I did not act on it. Caleb looked happy, and Madison was pleasant, and I was not the kind of father who turned instinct into accusation before evidence had earned the right to speak. The first real distance arrived quietly. That is how distance usually comes when people want to pretend nothing has changed. Caleb stopped coming by the workshop on Sunday afternoons. Not all at once. At first, he missed one because Madison had plans, then another because they were meeting her mother for lunch. Then Sundays became complicated, then busy, then something we both stopped naming. For years, Sunday had been our loose agreement. No formal invitation. No emotional announcement. He would come through the side gate around 2, open the workshop door without knocking, and say something about the game, or his truck, or a cabinet hinge in his apartment that needed looking at even though he was perfectly capable of fixing it himself. I would make coffee. He would lean against the workbench. We would talk the way men in my family often talk, which is to say around the thing and not always directly through it. After Madison, those afternoons thinned. Phone calls shortened. Texts replaced visits. When I asked if everything was all right, Caleb said, "Yeah, Dad. Just a lot going on." I believed him because I wanted to. Then came the wedding. It was a good day. Madison looked beautiful. Caleb looked nervous and happy. I wore the charcoal suit I had altered myself because paying someone else to adjust my sleeves felt foolish when I had hands that still worked. After the honeymoon, Madison moved into the house. I told myself it made sense. Caleb was my son. The house had room. Young couples needed a start, and I had been given enough years alone with my routines. I told myself sons become husbands. I told myself fathers have to step back. I told myself many reasonable things. Most of them were true. None of them were complete. Diane Cho arrived in February for what Madison called a short visit. 2 weeks. That was the number given. People should be careful with small numbers. They make large impositions sound temporary. Diane was 62, and she carried herself with the confidence of a woman who had never entered a room without first deciding where everyone else belonged inside it. She was pleasant when she wanted to be, but her pleasantness had edges. It did not invite you closer. It measured whether you were useful. She came with Trevor, Madison's older brother. 38. Unemployed, broad-shouldered in the soft way of a man who had stopped doing anything hard but still expected his size to count as authority. He brought 2 duffel bags, a laptop, a gaming headset, and the expression of someone checking into a place where payment was someone else's problem. By the second night, Trevor had taken over the sofa. By the 5th, he had rearranged the living room pillows because, according to him, this setup makes no sense. By the end of the first week, my coffee was gone before I had my second cup. The garage refrigerator was full of energy drinks I did not buy, and a stack of delivery containers had appeared beside my trash cans as if the house had become responsible for cleaning up after him. Diane moved more quietly. That made her worse. She reorganized the pantry one afternoon while I was in the workshop. When I came inside, the flour was on a different shelf, my coffee filters had been moved to a drawer I never used, and Grace's old recipe box had been pushed behind a ceramic bowl Madison had bought because it matched the new color palette. I stood there for a full minute looking at that recipe box. Then I moved it back. I said nothing. That was my mistake. I told myself I was being patient, that Madison's family had troubles I did not fully understand, that Caleb was trying to balance a marriage, and a father who made everything a line in the sand would only make the balance harder. 2 weeks became 6. 6 weeks became 3 months. Trevor stopped asking where things were and started complaining when they were not where he expected them to be. Diane referred to the guest room as my room. Madison began saying things like, "We're all adjusting," as if the adjustment were shared equally by the people taking space and the man losing it. I kept quiet longer than I should have. I thought silence was restraint. They heard permission. The sentence about property values came in late March. I was in the workshop, fitting a drawer slide into a built-in cabinet for a client who wanted the piece to look like it had always belonged in her house. The doors were open because the weather had finally turned mild, and sound carried cleanly from the back hallway when the kitchen window was cracked. Diane's voice came first. "This neighborhood has appreciated more than Madison understands." I stopped measuring. Not because the sentence was criminal. It was not. People talk about property values. Homeowners talk about property values. Strangers at hardware stores will tell you what your roof is worth if you stand still long enough. But Diane did not sound curious. She sounded pleased. Madison said something too low for me to catch. Then Diane answered, clearer this time. "When the time comes, this has to be handled cleanly. Not emotionally. Cleanly." The pencil stayed in my hand. I remember that because the tip was resting against the wood, and I had to sand out the small dark mark later. Handled. Cleanly. Those were not words people used when they were talking about a family visit. They were words for paperwork, transitions, control. The kind of words people chose when they had already decided the human part of a situation was an obstacle to be managed. I stood there with the cabinet half-fitted in front of me and told myself I was tired. That I had misheard. That 3 months of Trevor on my sofa and Diane in my pantry had made me suspicious. So I went back to work. The drawer slid in perfectly. I did not sleep well that night. The second Tuesday in October, Caleb came to the workshop while I was trimming a cabinet door. I heard him before I saw him. The side gate opened, then closed. His steps crossed the gravel slower than usual. When he appeared in the workshop doorway, he did not come all the way in. That was the first thing I noticed. For most of his life, Caleb had entered that shop like it belonged to both of us. Not legally, not in the way deeds and tax records decide things, but in the way a child belongs inside the rooms where his father taught him how to hold a hammer, how to sweep before leaving, how to keep his fingers away from a saw blade, because one careless second could follow you for the rest of your life. That day, he stopped at the threshold. "Dad," he said. I set the cabinet door on the bench. "What is it?" He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I had seen since he was a boy. He had done it at 12 when he broke a window with a baseball. At 17 when he backed the Ranger into a mailbox. At 24 when he needed help with rent, but tried to make the request sound like an update. He was working up to something. Madison's family is coming back for a while. I looked at him. How long is a while? He glanced at the floor. 30 days. The workshop went quiet around us. Not silent. A shop is never silent. Wood settles. Metal shifts. The old refrigerator hums near the wall. But everything important in that room seemed to stop moving. 30 days, I said. It's just temporary. Trevor was on my sofa for 3 months. Caleb winced, but he had come prepared to wince through things. I know. This is different. How? He looked past me toward the clamps on the wall. Diane needs space. Trevor is dealing with some things. Madison is under a lot of pressure, and everybody feels like the house would work better if. He stopped. I waited. A man should not help another man finish a sentence meant to hurt him. Caleb swallowed. If you weren't here. I looked at my son for a long moment. Then I said, say that plainly. His face tightened. They don't want you here, Dad. There it was. Not hidden in the pantry. Not carried through a cracked kitchen window. Not dressed up as property values or family comfort or temporary adjustment. Plain. They did not want me in my own house. Caleb kept talking because silence would have required him to hear himself. I thought maybe you could stay at a motel. Or with Henry. It's only 30 days. Madison thinks some space would help everyone reset. Madison thinks. His jaw moved. Don't do that. Do what? Make it sound like she's the problem. I let the sentence sit between us. Then Madison appeared behind him. Of course she did. She had not just arrived. I understood that immediately. She had been close enough to hear, waiting for the point where Caleb might weaken and need reinforcement. Her smile was soft. Managed. Tom, she said, we're not trying to hurt you. Things change. Families change. Behind her, Diane stood in the hallway with her purse still on her shoulder, looking less like a guest than someone inspecting a property before purchase. Trevor leaned against the living room entrance, phone in hand, already inside my house, as if the decision had been made before anyone bothered informing me. You'll be fine, Trevor said. There are decent motels around here. I looked at Caleb. Not Madison. Not Diane. Not Trevor. My son. This is my home. He nodded, but not in agreement. In exhaustion. In surrender. In the practiced helplessness of a man who had mistaken weakness for peace. I know, he said, but Madison is my family now. The words landed clean. Almost professionally. A good cut does that. You do not always feel it at first. You only see what is opened. I took off my apron. I hung it on the peg beside the door. Then I walked past all of them to my bedroom and packed 4 days of clothes, my medication, my phone charger, and the leather folder where I kept important papers because Grace's death had taught me that crisis punishes people who cannot find documents. When I came back, Trevor was on my sofa. Diane had her arms crossed. Madison was directing Caleb to move my hallway table to make room for their bags. They were already moving my hallway table. I rolled the suitcase to the front door. No one stopped me. The deadbolt clicked behind me. That sounded something inside my chest I did not have a name for. Not because I was locked out of a building. A man can be locked out of a hotel room, a truck, a storage unit. You deal with that. You call someone. You wait. You get back in. This was different. That lock belonged to me. That door belonged to me. The house behind it held my wife's coffee mug, my son's height marks, my grandfather's hand plane, and 24 years of mortgage payments no one in that living room had helped me make. I stood on the porch with the suitcase handle in my hand and listened to Trevor laugh at something inside. Then I walked. There was a park bench at the end of Crestwood Lane under a large oak tree. I had passed it for years without ever sitting down. That afternoon, I sat there for 1 hour and 4 minutes. I know because I checked the time twice. At first, I did nothing but breathe. Then I opened my contacts and called Henry Caldwell. Henry had been my closest friend for 34 years. Retired real estate attorney. Widower. Korean war history obsessive. The kind of man who asked practical questions so quickly you sometimes mistook it for lack of sympathy. He answered on the second ring. Tom. I told him everything. Caleb. Madison. Diane. Trevor. 30 days. The deadbolt. Henry did not interrupt. When I finished, he was quiet for maybe 3 seconds. Then he said, "Whose name is on the deed?" Mine. Anyone else? No. His voice changed. Good. Stay exactly where you are. I'm coming. Henry arrived in 38 minutes. He pulled up beside the park in a dark blue sedan he had owned for 12 years and still kept cleaner than most men keep their kitchens. He did not get out immediately. He looked at the house first. My house. Then he looked at me. Get in, he said. That was Henry's version of tenderness. I put the suitcase in the back seat and sat beside him while the porch light came on down the block, automatic and indifferent. Henry opened a folder on his lap. He had already brought a legal pad. You are the sole owner, he said. That means Caleb has no authority to remove you from the property. He lives there. That gives him residency, not ownership. He's my son. That gives him history, not title. The words were blunt enough to hurt and clean enough to help. Henry continued. No one can force you out of your own home without a court order. They do not have one. They cannot invent one because Madison's mother wants space and her brother likes your sofa. I looked toward the house. I walked out. You walked out under pressure. That does not surrender ownership. It does not abandon the property. It does not create a legal right for them to exclude you. For the first time since the deadbolt clicked, something inside me shifted from pain into structure. Not comfort. Structure. There is a difference. Henry handed me his phone, already open to the camera. Tonight, you stay with me. Tomorrow, when they leave the house, you go back in. And do what? Photograph everything. Every room. Every item moved. Every change they made. Every piece of your property they touched. I looked at him. He held my gaze. Tom, stop thinking like a father for 1 hour and think like the owner. They left the house at 1:52 the next afternoon. I know because Caleb texted me. Do you need anything from Costco? That was the sentence. 10 words, so ordinary they almost became insulting by accident. As if I were simply resting somewhere else. As if my son had not watched me wheel a suitcase through my own front door less than 24 hours earlier. I did not answer. I waited 12 minutes, then drove to Crestwood Lane with Henry following behind me in his sedan. I used my key. That mattered. I did not break in. I did not sneak into someone else's space. I unlocked a door I owned, stepped into a house I had paid for, and stood in the front hallway while the silence rearranged itself around me. The first changes were small. My hallway table had been moved to the dining room. Grace's framed photograph had been turned face down on a bookshelf, not broken, not hidden, just displaced with the careless confidence of people who believed her presence was inconvenient decor. The living room smelled like takeout and someone else's cologne. Trevor's shoes were under my coffee table. Diane's coat was on Grace's old chair. I photographed everything. Wide shot. Close shot. Timestamp. Henry had taught me that on the drive over. Photograph like you're explaining the room to someone who has never loved it. Then I opened the back door and went to the workshop. That was when the air left me. Not dramatically. No sound. Just an internal stop, as if something inside my ribs had refused to continue. My workbench had been cleared with no understanding of what clearing meant. Clamps had been dumped into a plastic storage bin, metal on metal, jaws twisted together. The walnut boards I had selected for a dining table commission were leaning against the wall at a bad angle, One of them already bowed enough that I knew it would never sit true again. My chisels were scattered in a drawer with loose screws. My grandfather's block plane was on the floor under the bench. On the floor. Walter Bennett's block plane, the one he had let me hold before he ever let me use it, the one I kept oiled and wrapped in cloth, was lying beside a cardboard box of holiday decorations Madison must have decided belonged in the shop. For a while, I only looked at it. Then I took a photograph. Because anger is useful only after the record exists. The templates were worse. Hand-drawn furniture patterns I had kept for 30 years had been folded, stacked, and shoved into a moving box labeled garage stuff in Diane's handwriting. Table legs, chair backs, cabinet profiles, notes in my own pencil from jobs I had finished before Caleb was old enough to read. Garage stuff. That was what they had called 41 years of work. I photographed every board, every tool, every drawer, every careless displacement. Then I picked up my grandfather's plane, wrapped it in a clean rag, and set it back on the bench. Not repaired. Not restored. Just back where it belonged. I found the papers on the dining room table. That was another insult. Not the existence of them. Their placement. They had spread the documents out on the same table where Grace used to help Caleb with spelling words, where I had paid bills after midnight, where mortgage statements had sat in neat stacks for years while I made sure the roof stayed over our heads. Now there were real estate brochures on it. 3 of them. All for houses outside Raleigh with prices circled in blue pen. Not modest houses. Not emergency houses. Houses with open kitchens, staged fireplaces, and words like updated, spacious, and investment potential printed in cheerful fonts that made greed look domestic. Beside them was a legal guide. Printed from the internet. Several paragraphs had been underlined. Transfer of property. Voluntary conveyance. Notarized signature. Capacity of grantor. I photographed each page before touching anything. Then I saw the form underneath. Quitclaim deed. I knew enough to understand what I was looking at before I read the names. Still, I read them. Grantor, Thomas Bennett. Grantee, Caleb Bennett. The signature line was blank. The notary section was blank. Everything else had been prepared. My full legal name, my address, the parcel information, the county, the property description copied from records someone had taken the time to find. I stood there with the phone in my hand and felt the last soft excuse I had been making for my son fall away. This was not a family conflict. This was not Madison needing space. This was not Diane being overbearing or Trevor being useless or Caleb being weak under pressure. This was a transfer attempt. A prepared document waiting for my signature. I looked at the deed for a long moment. Then I photographed it from every angle. The whole page. The names. The blank signature line. The underlined legal guide beside it. The brochures. The pen. The sticky note near the corner that said, in Madison's neat handwriting, ask about notary after he calms down. After he calms down. That was when I understood the shape of the plan. First, remove me from the house. Then make me feel unreasonable for objecting. Then wait for exhaustion, guilt, or loneliness to make my hand easier to guide. They had not come to visit. They had come to take. Henry's dining room became a war room by 9:40 that night. He would have hated that description. Henry did not believe in dramatic language unless a courtroom required it. But there was no better word for the way he spread the photographs across the table, sorted them by room, and began writing labels on yellow sticky notes with the calm precision of a man building a bridge out of facts. Workshop damage. Unauthorized displacement of personal property. Prepared quitclaim deed. Possible coercion. Potential elder financial exploitation. I sat across from him with a cup of coffee I had not touched. Every photograph looked worse under his dining room light. My grandfather's plane on the floor. Grace's photograph face down. The quitclaim deed with my name sitting in the grantor box like someone had already decided I was only an obstacle between them and the signature line. Henry read the legal guide twice. Then he removed his glasses and placed them beside the documents. "This is not a family misunderstanding," he said. "I know." "No," he said. "I need you to hear it correctly. This is an attempted transfer of real property through pressure, isolation, and prepared documentation that moves it out of hurt feelings and into fraud territory." The word fraud landed differently when Henry said it. Not like anger. Like category. He tapped the quitclaim deed photo. They may argue it was hypothetical. They may say Caleb requested it, not them. They may claim you overreacted. But the document, the removal from the home, the damage, and the pressure together create a pattern. What do? Henry reached for his phone. We make sure the pattern is seen by people who know what it means. The first call was to Priya Shah, a real estate fraud attorney Henry had known for 12 years. She listened for 6 minutes, asked whether I was the sole owner, whether the deed was unsigned, and whether I had photographs. Henry said yes to all 3. She said, "I'll clear my morning." The second call was to Detective Elena Marquez with the County Property Crimes Unit. Henry did not embellish. He gave facts, dates, names, and the existence of a prepared deed. Detective Marquez said she would review documentation before determining charges. The third call was to Anita Wells at Adult Protective Services. When Henry hung up, he looked at me. "Tomorrow," he said, "we let them feel the walls move." They went shopping again the next afternoon. That had become a pattern too. Diane, Madison, and Trevor left the house in Caleb's SUV around 1:30, dressed like people running errands with someone else's money. Caleb went with them. I watched from Henry's car half a block down, feeling something colder than anger settle into place. "They like leaving the scene unattended," Henry said. "That sounds like lawyer language." "It is." We waited until the SUV turned off Crestwood Lane. Then we went in. Again, I used my key. Again, the house opened because it was mine. Henry moved through the room slower than I had the day before. He did not love the place, so he could see it as evidence more easily than I could. He photographed from corners, doorways, and low angles. He took wide shots first, then close-ups. The living room, the hallway, the kitchen, the guest room Diane had already begun treating as permanent. Then we went to the workshop. Henry stopped at the door. He had been in my shop hundreds of times over the years, usually to drink coffee and tell me my shelves were too organized for a man who claimed not to be particular. That day, he said nothing for almost a full minute. Then he raised his phone and started documenting. "Unauthorized displacement of tools," he said quietly. "Potential damage to materials. Personal property mishandled. Professional workspace disrupted." He photographed the bowed walnut board, the mixed chisels, the bent template corners. My grandfather's block plane, now back on the bench where I had placed it, but still bearing the fact that someone had put it on the floor. When we finished, Henry handed me a small black device. "Keep this in your pocket." I looked at it. Recorder. Recorder. It transmits to my phone and backs up to cloud storage in real time. Is that legal? In North Carolina, one-party consent applies. If you are part of the conversation, you can record it. I turned the device over in my hand. It was small. Plain. Nothing dramatic. That made sense. The things that change a life rarely look like much before they are used. Henry looked toward the front of the house. When they come back, don't accuse first. Ask. Let them explain. And if they lie? He gave me the kind of smile that had probably unsettled many opposing attorneys. Then let them keep talking. They came back at 6:47 p.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Not hiding. Not standing in the hallway like a man waiting to be challenged. Sitting. I had made coffee in my own kitchen, in the blue ceramic mug Grace bought me in 1996 after I complained for 3 straight weeks that every mug we owned was too small for a man who worked before sunrise. The recorder was in my shirt pocket. On. Henry was 3 blocks away with the live feed open on his phone. I heard the SUV before I saw headlights sweep across the front windows. Doors opened. Bags rustled. Trevor laughed too loudly in the driveway. Diane said something about the boutique on Glenwood being overpriced, but worth it for the right pieces. The front door opened. Madison came in first carrying 2 shopping bags and the confident exhaustion of a woman who believed the house had continued obeying her while she was gone. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. The smile appeared automatically. Then it froze before it finished forming. "Tom," she said, "we weren't expecting you." Caleb came in behind her and saw me. His face changed in 3 separate stages. Surprise. Alarm. Then the hollow look of a man realizing the thing he had agreed to might require more courage than he had brought with him. Diane stepped around them with a bag from a home goods store in one hand. Trevor filled the hallway behind her, new sneakers bright against my old wood floor. No one spoke for a moment. I lifted the mug and took one slow drink. Coffee helps a man remember where his hands belong. Madison set her bags down carefully. "What are you doing here?" I looked at her. Then at Caleb. Then at the kitchen I had painted twice, repaired 3 times, and paid for every month until the bank finally had no claim left on it. "I live here," I said. I set the mug down. The sound was small. Ceramic against wood. But everyone in that kitchen heard it, because silence had done what silence does when people know something is wrong and are waiting to see who names it first. "I was in the workshop today," I said. Caleb looked down. Madison did not. That told me something. I took photographs. Diane's eyes moved toward the hallway, then back to me. Trevor shifted his weight, the new sneakers making a soft sound against the floorboards I had refinished myself 15 years earlier. Madison's smile changed shape. Not gone. Adjusted. "Tom," she said, "I'm sure whatever you saw looked worse than it is. We were only trying to make the space more usable." "My workshop." "For the family," she said. "For the family." I let that sit. Then I looked at Caleb. "Your grandfather's plane was on the floor." His face tightened. Good. Some part of him still knew what that meant. I turned back to Madison. I also found paperwork on the dining room table. No one moved. That legal guide you printed, the real estate brochures, the quitclaim deed. Diane's mouth pressed into a line. Trevor stopped pretending to check his phone. Madison said nothing. "My name was in the grantor box," I said. Caleb's name was in the grantee box. The signature line was blank. Caleb looked at Madison. Not at me. At her. That told me more than any answer he could have given. I kept my voice level. I had learned in a shop that pressure applied correctly does more than force ever can. "I'm not yelling," I said. "I'm not guessing. I'm asking." I folded my hands on the table. Help me understand it. For a moment, no one answered. That was the moment when a lie usually looks for a door. Madison could have laughed. She could have said I was confused. She could have turned to Caleb and let him carry the next sentence for her, the way she had clearly let him carry the ugly ones before. Instead, something in her face changed. Not cracked. Lowered. The smile disappeared the way a porch light goes off when the timer ends. What remained underneath was not panic. It was tired calculation, stripped of decoration. When Caleb first told me about you, she said, he mentioned the house. Caleb looked at her like he had not expected her voice to sound that flat. Madison kept her eyes on me. A widowed father. A paid-off craftsman in a good neighborhood. A workshop. No other children. No wife. No one else with a claim. The kitchen seemed to narrow around the words. Diane said, Madison. Sharp. Warning. Madison ignored her. My mother lost her condo 3 years ago, she said. Trevor owes $64,000. Not regular debt. The kind people stop being polite about. My cards are maxed. Caleb's income is fine, but it is not enough to fix that. Caleb's chair scraped slightly against the floor. You said Trevor was handling it. Madison glanced at him then, and for the first time I saw open contempt pass across her face without being filtered. Trevor has never handled anything in his life. Trevor's jaw tightened. She turned back to me. We needed stability. No, I said quietly. You needed my house. Her eyes sharpened. Yes. The word landed cleanly. No apology. No softening. Just yes. The plan, she said, was not complicated. You were already alone. Caleb said you were stubborn, but practical. We thought if the house became uncomfortable enough, if you felt outnumbered enough, you would agree that transferring it to Caleb made sense. My son looked like someone had taken a wall out of his house and shown him the wiring behind it. You told me it was estate planning, he said. It was, Madison replied. Just not the sentimental version you wanted it to be. Diane stepped forward. Stop talking. Madison laughed once. Small. Empty. Why? He asked me to explain it. Then she looked at me again. We were going to make it look responsible. You're getting older. The house is too much. Caleb is your only child. Put it in his name now to avoid problems later. We could still let you live here, at least for a while, but the deed had to change first. At least for a while, I repeated. She did not flinch. That would have depended on how cooperative you were. The sentence was so honest, it almost sounded rehearsed. I looked at Caleb. His hands were flat on the table now, like he needed the wood to keep him upright. Did you know all of it? I asked him. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Madison answered for him. He knew we needed help. He knew the house mattered. He knew you were the obstacle. That was cruel. It was also probably close enough to true that Caleb could not reject it quickly. Diane's face had gone pale with fury, not at the plan, but at the confession. Trevor shifted in the hallway. This is stupid, he said. We don't have to stand here and listen to this. I looked at Madison. So the 30 days? To make you easier to manage, she said. People sign things when they feel displaced, when they feel guilty, when they want peace. I nodded once. There it was. Not a misunderstanding. Not pressure that had gone too far. A design. My house was the solution. My son was the access point. And I was the man they thought could be moved if enough people stood in my doorway. Trevor moved first. Not much. Half a step. But I have spent 41 years around tools that can take a finger because a man decides half an inch does not matter. Half an inch matters. A shift in weight matters. A shoulder turning toward you instead of away from you matters. I stood from the table. Slowly. Don't, I said. Trevor stopped, but his face kept coming. You think you can threaten us in the middle of the kitchen? He said. No, I said. I think you already threatened yourselves. Madison's eyes changed. She saw it before the others did. Maybe because she was the smartest person on that side of the room, which is not the same thing as being wise. Her gaze dropped to my shirt pocket. I reached in and took out the recorder. Small. Black. Plain. The kind of object nobody respects until it has already done its work. This entire conversation has been recorded, I said. Nobody moved. It has been transmitting in real time to Henry Caldwell. It is backed up to cloud storage. Henry is a retired real estate attorney, and as of this morning, he has been consulting with Detective Elena Marquez from the County Property Crimes Unit. Diane's hand went to the counter. Caleb closed his eyes. Trevor said, "That's illegal." "It isn't," I said. "One-party consent." I was part of the conversation. Madison sat down like her knees had reached the end of something. I kept my voice level. The photographs of the workshop, the legal guide, the real estate brochures, the prepared quitclaim deed, and your explanation of the plan are all going to Priya Shah. She specializes in real estate fraud. Diane whispered Madison's name. Not angry now. Afraid. I looked at each of them. Attempted real estate fraud, coercion, elder financial exploitation, damage and displacement of personal property. I do not know what charges Detective Marquez will recommend. That is not my job. Then I looked at Trevor. But if you take one more step toward me, that becomes part of the recording too. He stayed where he was. For the first time since they came into my house, no one mistook quiet for weakness. Diane was the first to sit down. Not because anyone invited her. Because her legs seemed to decide the conversation had gone further than her body could carry. Trevor stayed in the hallway with his mouth half open and nothing useful behind it. Madison sat at my kitchen table, pale and still, one hand resting beside a shopping bag that looked suddenly ridiculous. Caleb had not opened his eyes yet. I put the recorder back in my pocket. Then I said, "You have until tomorrow at noon." Madison looked up. To do what? To leave my house. Diane made a small sound. I kept my eyes on Madison because she had designed more of this than anyone else in the room. Call whoever has a guest room. Call a motel. Call someone who still believes your version of things. I do not care where you go, but by noon tomorrow, you will not be living here. Trevor said, "You can't just." "I can," I said. He stopped. That was the first intelligent thing he had done. That night, I slept in my own bed, in my own house, with the bedroom door locked. For the first time in 2 days, the deadbolt was not keeping me out. I was awake before 6. Not because I had slept well. Because my body knew the house was mine again before my mind trusted it. For a while, I stood in the kitchen with the lights off and drank coffee from Grace's blue mug while the morning came slowly through the east windows. The hallway was quiet. The guest room door was shut. Somewhere upstairs, people who had tried to take my home were now waiting for daylight to tell them what consequence looked like. At 7:15, I showered and shaved. Then I put on my charcoal suit. I had bought it in 2006 for Caleb's high school graduation and altered it myself because the sleeves were wrong and the shoulders sat badly. A suit should not announce itself. It should simply fit well enough that people stop noticing the cloth and start listening to the man inside it. I wore my father's watch. Not for luck. For weight. By 8:30, I was sitting across from Daniel Price at the bank. Daniel had managed my accounts for 9 years. He was young enough to call me Mr. Bennett even after I told him Tom was fine, and careful enough that I forgave him for it. I placed the folder on his desk. I need fraud alerts on all property-related accounts, I said. I need documentation that no transfer of real property is authorized by me unless I appear in person with identification and prior written notice from my attorney. Daniel's expression changed as he read. The quitclaim deed photo did that. So did the transcript. He did not ask unnecessary questions. Good bankers, like good carpenters, know when the work is serious. By 10:05, I was in Priya Shah's office. She was compact, exact, and did not waste a single word trying to make me feel better. I gave her everything. Photographs. The prepared deed. The legal guide. The workshop damage. The transcript from Henry's recording app. The cloud backup confirmation. Priya read for nearly 20 minutes. Then she folded her hands on the desk. The deed form establishes preparation, she said. The photographs establish context. The recording establishes intent. I nodded. She looked at me over the file. This is strong, Mr. Bennett. For the first time in 2 days, I felt something close to breath enter my chest properly. Not peace. Not yet. But proof. And proof was something I knew how to build with. The eviction orders were filed before noon. Priya did not call them dramatic. She called them necessary. There is a kind of comfort in dealing with people who use precise language when your life has become unreasonable. She explained what had been filed, what had been served, what came next, and what I should not do under any circumstances. Do not argue with them, she said. I wasn't planning to. Do not threaten them. I already gave them a deadline. That is different. Now let the paperwork speak. Legal notice was delivered to the house at 2:08 p.m. I know because Henry texted me a picture of the service confirmation. Delivered. One word. Clean as a chisel mark. I stayed away until 6. That was harder than I expected. Not because I wanted to watch them suffer. I did not. But because a man who has been pushed out of his own house develops a physical need to confirm the walls are still there, the doors still open, the rooms have not been rewritten while he is gone. When I came home, the hallway was full of boxes. Not organized boxes. Panic boxes. Clothes folded badly. Kitchen items wrapped in towels. Shoes thrown into trash bags. Trevor's gaming equipment stacked near the front door like a shrine to wasted time. Diane was in the kitchen, moving through cabinets with the stunned automatic motions of a woman who had mistaken confidence for ownership and then discovered ownership had paperwork attached. Trevor was loading his car. The new sneakers were on his feet. $320 of bright stupidity moving across my driveway, while he carried a laundry basket full of things he had no right to have unpacked in the first place. Madison was in the living room on the phone. Her voice was low. Tight. No, just for a few nights. I know it's short notice. No, Trevor would come too. She saw me and stopped speaking. Then she hung up. For a moment, we looked at each other. There was nothing arranged on her face anymore. No smile. No softness. No careful little performance of concern. Just a young woman who had built a plan around my silence and miscalculated what silence meant. I did not gloat. I did not lecture. I did not ask whether the house still looked like a solution. I walked past her into the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and moved Grace's recipe box back to its proper shelf. That was enough. Caleb found me on the back porch at 7:30. The house behind us was full of the sounds of people leaving. Boxes sliding across floors, car doors opening and closing, Trevor muttering from the driveway, Diane's voice low and sharp, then breaking off when nobody answered her the way she expected. Caleb stood in the doorway for a while before he came outside. He looked younger than 36. Not innocent. Younger. There is a difference. Innocence would have meant he had done nothing wrong. He had. He had stood in my living room and asked me to leave the house I bought after his mother died. He had let his wife use his name on a deed form. He had called her family while I stood on the wrong side of my own deadbolt. But younger meant something had collapsed in him. Something he had believed about his marriage, about himself, about the kind of man he was when pressure came. He sat beside me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The porch boards creaked under his weight. I remembered replacing that board myself when Caleb was 14, and he handed me nails one by one, proud to be useful. Finally, he said, "Dad." I looked out at the yard. "Not yet," I said. His face tightened, but he nodded. Good. For once, he did not argue with a boundary. We sat there in the October dark while 3 people packed up a plan that had failed. By 9, their cars were gone. Caleb's was not. That was something. Not everything. But something. 6 months later, Detective Elena Marquez filed charges against Diane Cho and Trevor Cho. Attempted real estate fraud. Elder financial exploitation. Conspiracy related to coercive property transfer. Priya called me before the paperwork became visible online because she said I should hear it from a person before I saw my life turn into searchable public record. I was in the workshop when she called, sanding the edge of a maple cabinet door by hand because machines are useful until the final part, when the work needs fingers. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. "No." "Do that anyway." So I sat on the old shop stool beside the bench while she explained it. Detective Marquez had spent months building the case in the way methodical people do, quietly, thoroughly, without caring whether anyone impatient understood the value of slow work. She had reviewed the photographs, the prepared quitclaim deed, the recording, the transcript, the bank protections, and the timeline of Diane and Trevor's stay in my home. Madison was not charged the same way. She accepted a cooperation agreement. I had expected that to make me angry. It did not. Not because she deserved mercy. I am still not certain what she deserved. But because the agreement required her to provide a complete, documented account of the scheme. When Diane first raised the house as an asset, how Trevor's debts became urgent, how my removal from the home was discussed, and how Caleb's name became the easiest way to make the paperwork look like family planning instead of theft. Priya said Madison's statement filled in what the recording had not. The planning. The timeline. The intention behind the 30 days. Trevor's gambling debts were sent to another agency. Priya would not say much about that, and I did not ask. I have lived long enough to know that people who owe $64,000 rarely owe it neatly. Money like that leaves marks. Diane's attorney tried to describe the whole thing as a misunderstanding between relatives. Detective Marquez's report apparently used a different phrase. Coordinated property exploitation. I wrote that down after Priya said it. Not because I liked the phrase. Because it was accurate. And after everything that had happened, accuracy felt like justice beginning to speak in its own language. Madison left Caleb 3 weeks after the charges were filed. He did not fight it. That told me something. Not enough to forgive him. Not enough to erase the porch, the suitcase, the deadbolt, or the sound of his voice saying Madison was his family now. But enough to know he had stopped mistaking surrender for loyalty. She took what she considered hers. Clothes. Shoes. 2 lamps I had never liked. A framed print she bought because she said the living room needed something less old. Caleb watched her carry boxes to a rental truck and did not ask her to stay. After that, he started calling me on Sundays. The first call lasted 4 minutes. He said, "Hey, Dad." I said, "Caleb." Then there was a silence large enough to hold everything neither of us knew how to touch yet. He told me the Panthers had lost. I said I had seen that. The second Sunday, he called again. Then the third. Then the fourth. For 4 months, he kept calling. Sometimes we talked about weather, sometimes about the truck. Sometimes he asked whether I needed help in the workshop, and sometimes I said no even when I did, because help and repair are not the same thing. But he called. Every Sunday. A joint does not become strong because you press it together once. It holds because the work is done carefully, slowly, and without pretending the crack was never there. The workshop took longer to restore than the house. That surprised me at first. The hallway table went back in 10 minutes. Grace's photograph went back where it belonged. The pantry took one quiet afternoon and a level of irritation I chose not to examine too closely. But the workshop was different. A room where work happens has a memory, not a sentimental one, a practical one. Every clamp has a reason for hanging where it hangs. Every chisel belongs in a place your hand can find before your eyes do. Every board has to sit correctly, or time will punish you for neglecting it. I spent 3 days just sorting. The furniture templates came first. I laid them flat between sheets of clean paper and weighted them under books until the creases softened. Some corners never fully recovered. That bothered me more than I expected, until Henry told me damaged things can still be useful if you stop demanding they look untouched. My grandfather's block plane returned to the shelf above the bench. Place of honor. Oiled. Sharpened. Wrapped properly. I did not use it for a month after that. I only looked at it sometimes while the afternoon light moved across the shop floor, reminding myself that being mishandled is not the same as being ruined. Then came the walnut table. A couple from Durham commissioned it for their first house. 8 feet long. Clean lines. No decorative nonsense. Joinery that would require patience, not showmanship. 40 hours of careful work before finishing. Maybe more. I accepted the job because it felt honest. A dining table is not dramatic. It does not announce survival. It simply stands in the center of a room and holds weight while people gather around it. That seemed like the kind of work I trusted again. So I measured. Cut. Sanded. Fitted the joints slowly. And when the first corner came together true, I stood there with both hands on the wood and breathed like a man hearing something hold. The deadbolt is still the same one. Same brass faceplate. Same small scratch near the edge from the winter I carried a cabinet door through the front hall and misjudged the turn. Same sound when it slides into place. Click. For 2 days, that sound meant I was outside my own life. Now it means the opposite. It means Grace's mug is in the kitchen where it belongs. My grandfather's plane is above the workbench. The pantry door still holds the marks where Caleb grew taller than I was ready for. They used my own deadbolt to lock me out. Now it locks everything I love safely inside.